to another edition of Creative Current. I'm Shana Dambrot, your host, and our guest today is Los Angeles-based artist Guillermo Bert, whose current exhibition at the Pasadena Museum of California Art is up through Sunday, February 27th. Is that right? 24th.
Yeah.
Sunday, February 24th. Welcome, Guillermo. Thanks for coming in.
Hey, Shana.
So when I met you, you were doing work that was very sort of painterly and figurative,
Right.
and even a little symbolic. It had a kind of an allegorical quality to it. I kind of remember like almost like sprite creatures and kind of spirit's a tricky word, but sort of ethereal, imagery. That's what I remember. And then the next big splash was you started doing these barcode paintings.
Right.
And people went insane for the barcode paintings. They love those. Like right now out there in internet TV land, they're going, oh, right, those barcode paintings. I love those.
Well, I mean, this is probably 6 years ago. I was in a transition, where you referred to the more representational work, and I was incorporating some elements of language in the paintings. So I create sort of like customize the language using Greek typography, and I customized in a way I was able to write in English, but with Greek characters.
Right.
So it looked like encoding. It could look like something that it would is familiar to you. You've seen the Greek, but you never try to read them actually.
Right, and then suddenly you realize you are reading them. You do know what they say and what
that series was called Subliminal Desire, and
Subliminal Desire.
That's sort of like the relationship with the images that I have. They're more classical in nature, and then this encoding subliminal aspect of it. And I was digging a little bit into mathematics and other forms of language. And then suddenly I thought, well, the barcoding is an encoding situation, but it's very minimalist and very basic. And then I developed another concept that was the branding. So I thought the barcoding is a form of branding. So I developed this series that was called Barcode Branding America, and it was talk about the where the commerce started and then where the culture begins.
Right.
The transition in between these two elements.
And being an individual in a context of this kind of mass production and
right. So I started doing what's the price of democracy or what is the price of justice, and kind of attaching monetary prices to all these values. Justice, whatever it was attached to it, it was just like the monetary value.
What is the monetary value of justice?
Well, I mean, it's just the question is like you pose the question and then everybody got their own probably answer to it.
People love the work because it was timely, because we were all, that sort of permission to be a little bit political. Did you get any feedback from the community, or what was it like?
I was showing at Peter Blake Gallery, which is a
fantastic gallery. Yeah.
And then the issue is that he was very much into the fetish. With that group of artists and the high gloss and all this.
That was the
super
group show
saturated.
that I went to with the gold piece in it.
Right. So the issue is that some of these minimalist pieces with the price of democracy, when you approach them and they're sort of like vertical lines with the word democracy, and then there are candy apple colors with Corvette painting and all of that, they really look like, you wouldn't expect to like having like a political statement made of that kind of luxury kind of surfaces. So, but he was very much into that, and the gallery is like wide space, and they will look gorgeous. So you get into it, you get in love with it, the surfaces and the candy apple colors and all that.
Even the people that are on board with what you're trying to say are still kind of, in a way, upholding the sort of analogy to that might exist within the art world, and that idea of, okay, you're talking about what is the price of democracy, and that's a good abstract question. What's the price of justice? Right. But then, as you know, there's also this whole cultural thread of why are paintings worth $1 million? It's just, and there's a little, there's like that.
For sure, yes.
So that kind of seems like an aspect of it too, even though that's not what the work's about. It sort of can't help it. But yet it's this hall of mirrors. It kind of goes back and forth all the way down. Right. It's kind of great.
One aspect of it is that some of the pieces, like God said, democracy or something like that. Some of the pieces I was at a certain point in that series, they start actually encoding, because traditionally we're just like symbolic, these barcodes.
So you just said it looked like a barcode, but it wasn't a barcode.
Right, it wasn't a functional barcode. It was visually the barcode. but then I started encoding the codes, and then we're eliminating the words actually. So it was just leaving the barcode that is like a hermetic language. I mean, you don't know what they are unless you have it scanned.
The computer knows what it means, but you don't.
Right. There's a really interesting feature when you encode barcodes. They ask you if you want it to be read by humans. Because you want it just to be read by machines.
And you can say yes or no.
Right. And when the human part, it has like some typography outside and say what it is. Otherwise, it's just the barcode, and then unless you have a machine, you don't know what it is. So these pieces were like that. So I did another group of pieces that were called democracy pattern. And they were just the pattern, like physical patterns that they said democracy or something, but they were in a pattern formation, and it looked like an abstract design pretty much. So I was kind of playing with the abstract ideas and also how removed from the perception of the people are.
The series in general you're referring to, it's sort of like almost like you've invented a genre with the title, is Encoded Textiles. And that's right, and that's also the name of the show itself. It's what they are. They're woven wall they're tapestries, woven pieces, physically like made out of, yarn, wool. But basically what you're looking at is a wall hanging that could easily be mistaken for just a very lovely Native American or Latin American Indian or your Navajo blankets like you might see in a museum. They're that gorgeous, that clean, that big on the wall. Rugs that you are never meant to walk on. That genre, except as you look at it a little while longer, you realize they all have a central square, which is a QR code. Like a barcode, it's scanned by a computer eye, a phone, camera, lens, whatever. So I take a picture of the code, and then I hit a button, and my smartphone browser opens a website, and all the information about whatever it is I've just seen is readily available there for me. So that code, which very closely visually resemble the geometrical abstract patterns of these specific weaving legacies.
This pixelation, this structure, they look pretty much like Latin American textile in general.
So you just went right. You just knew that.
It took me a while to kind of figure out where they feel so familiar. They use these particular tapestries, or like a poncho, like they wear it. That is all the squares that they're almost identical. And I thought if you swap them, they're gonna look just like it.
It's amazing.
And I started trying different because there's 2 or 3 different the new generation of barcode. There's 2 or 3 that they look like that pattern square, like the one that they use for the postal office, let's say, similar to that. But there is another one, which is the one that actually I'm using, which is one of them, is the Aztec code. There's like one square and then another square and another one. Well, that is the pyramid seen from above.
Oh.
So.
Yeah, it is.
The concept of the weaving, I thought it was very interesting in the sense that when you're talking about stories, where it's, capturing stories. So you're weaving the stories together, So I thought the textile has also this expression of this connotation, or metaphorically speaking, is like in itself is like a metaphor, like the weaving the stories together, right?
Literally, and the job of it is to keep these stories sort of archived.
And one thing that I in the evolution of this concept, I realized that these groups, these communities, the tradition, even with the conversation with them, I realized that the tradition is fading out. They're when they tell, like the grandparent told a story, but then then they remember a few of them, and then when they give it to the children, they even remember less. So the entire tradition, that's an oral tradition, is been fading out and disappearing. So because of the like this barcode they used to capture identity in the Western world,
which is often seen as a sort of a negative thing, like this idea that we're all robots, we have barcodes on our neck, but in this case, actually.
I thought it was a device, like that you can use for your own advantage. When you get into an airplane, you get your boarding pass with all these, they look like a little textile right there. I mean, from my perspective, I was
thinking of this everything about you in that.
Right. Yeah. And when you go to the hospital or something, they give you a bracelet with all the story, there. And even your driver's license has the same barcode in there. So I thought this element of capturing identity, I thought that we can reverse that and capture the fading out identity to kind of encode it in there. and we're talking about first person narratives or poetry or some, quotes of people that they're describing the culture, just to leave it as a legacy. But the tradition itself is being represented by the weaving, the technology of the wool, the loom, and all this process that are carried through the culture itself, because they have also symbology, some elements of the healing plants or that they're being used in the culture. So there's a lot of elements.
And
of the
it's a
culture
kind of language, of course, that you're interested in. So,
right.
Okay.
So to put these two technologies together and blend them into these tapestries, that it seems to be just one level. I mean, when you see it first, it seems like a traditional textile. You won't see the actual.
If you didn't know that that's what you were looking for,
Right.
you could absolutely be forgiven for not seeing it.
Right, and that's really
Which is part of the magic, because it really does merge. It becomes
Right.
one. It's as authentic as anything you would imagine that tribe of
Right.
master weavers would produce on their own without you. It's beautiful. What part of the reason I'm interested in it is because even though there's no more painting and there's no more epoxy and all that stuff, that it is so logical as a sort of continuation or evolution of the painting that you've been doing. Like,
Right.
With the codes. I mean, it makes a lot of sense in the context of that, even though they could not look any more different. And of course, what's also interesting is you're not making them because you have access to the best people. First of all, conceptually, it has to be done by them.
Right.
But also aesthetically, it's going to be as beautiful as it can possibly be when it's done by the people that are centuries of experts at it, right? So of course that's preferable. But it also kind of funnily reminds me of, the sort of like Kuhns and Kastabis where they farm out the production to assistants and whatever, or just even the things when it's perfectly legitimate, but like a Richard Serra who's got to get a shipbuilder to build, the giant steel, bend the steel, or whatever. That's such a 20th century kind of American industrial thing, and yet you're also in that kind of thread of an artist who has a fabricator. Let's call them the fabricators, right? But it's for the opposite reason. You know what I mean? It's like it's a little poetry there.
Well, right.
And then also, if you could just briefly talk, I want to ask two questions that I think that are just the ones that are fascinating to me. First of all, how did you approach and explain this concept to them?
Right.
How does that even happen, right? Because did it seem normal? Did it seem strange? Were they like, oh, we've been doing that for the local? I mean, how did they react to it? And then secondly, but relatedly, how has it been to be showing these in the sort of fine art gallery context in which, normally you would go to a craft museum or something and to see kind of amazing Navajo textiles, and people will go see that. It's incredibly popular. And they'll say, oh, it's like art. It's as good as art.
Right.
But what they mean by that is it's craft.
Right.
And of course, that's not been where you're interested in showing or where you're showing them.
It was very interesting, actually. The entire, putting together this project. We start talking to people, who will be interesting, who can give us lead how to approach this community, how can, create like a format that it would be able to allow us to go there and start communicating and expressing these ideas and try to make them understand, at the same time be willing to participate, and also the making of the project. That's the hard part, actually. Just how to make this thing to work.
Because it has to work, like with my iPhone, 5,000 miles away later.
Well, originally we had the possibility that this will be symbolic too. They were women there. It's like when you go to like a Mayan
it's so much cooler that it really works.
We have to make this work.
So much cooler.
Right. And then it was funny because one of the things that happened really kind of toward the end is that we brought one of the weavers to LA to finish the pieces here because it was very difficult to actually do them all. So we did like one piece there, but it took like 8 months. And then when she came here for a couple months, we did the other 4. Then we finished it like right before the show. If we would have done it there, it would take 3-4 years. So we couldn't do that. But because the issue was that she had to travel quite a bit. It's Chile, go to the Andes, and teach weaving to these people in the little villages. And then come back and had to be sitting down. It's a gigantic thing that it has to be like weaving a barcode. So it wasn't really, she did one, but it was very difficult and painful, and it wasn't really that well developed. So we were Skyping and sending messages and doing whatever we could, but in reality it was very difficult. So in the beginning when we started, we started approaching this community through different means, like got names and we went there, we started traveling, and then just to explain the process and all these things, we kind of pre-done it through email and some, phone conversation. But until we got there and we actually showing the mock-ups that I did in Photoshop, like where I overimposed these textiles to the thing, and then they were kind of intrigued and kind of excited, but they didn't know what to make out of it.
Sure.
So we were just kind of trying to see, well, would you do this? I mean, would you give it a shot? Can we start doing prototypes, And of course we got, certain budget and we hired them to do the prototypes and to, participate on that regard. While at the same time we were start talking to these people in the community to try to get people that I would like to interview and sort of like a representative that I can describe some of the, like a poet or like a medicine man or like a
historian.
Right. So those people were like videotaping just to get the stories that would be encoded into
for the
textile.
content.
Right, exactly.
Right.
And then at the same time, we were, on the other hand, working with the weavers to produce this prototype and try to see if we can be read, So it was very difficult actually. And then it was stressful and took months and months and months, and it took us like 2 years to get this straight out.
Wow.
Until we produced the first textile. And then, but at that point, because of the process was so interesting, we started filming the making of the project, and we started developing this documentary film about the entire process.
Right.
That's called Coded Stories.
Coded Stories.
Question that you asked me actually when you see it in visuals, like how they get amazed about these codes and these textiles, how the process of prototyping and capturing the stories, and then how they start blending together. And the people that came here to weave, the weaver that we brought here, Anita, when she was leaving, she was telling me later, said like, nobody, everybody thought that she's crazy to come to LA, to, from the south of Chile, to come to Los Angeles to start reading some barcodes. It's never gonna happen. It's never gonna work.
That's the craziest thing I've ever heard.
Right. And she herself, she'd say like, I don't know if this is gonna happen. I mean, if it would have worked, but we're gonna give it a shot. And
well, it worked, and
it did work. And she was jumping up and down, and we were all happy, and we were all thrilled.
And there is nothing cooler than taking a picture of a native textile and having your phone tell you about the history of the village where it was made.
Right.
What's interesting, what I love about them, and this goes back to the barcode thing too a little bit, is that it's not that content, that aspect of the meaning and the sort of socio-political ramifications of it is not ambiguous anymore. It's right there. That completes the piece.
Oh, yeah.
When you take that step and you have this information. So your point of view and what's being championed is just much more clear, because you see the whole sort of thing unfold, and then it finishes in front of you. It's not just, what is just, what price, which has a place and a kind of ambiguity, but the fact that this goes exactly what you said about the storytelling, which is what those textiles exist to do in that culture, that actually not far from sort of like diluting that history or making it strange, the way that you're infusing the technology into it actually fulfills that storytelling function.
Oh, for sure.
That the textiles on their own exist to fulfill. And that with the addition of this dimension of it, it actually happens. And the things that are being forgotten through the oral tradition are actually being archived, sort of like on the internet now, where everything is being archived, but it's not going to be forgotten anymore. Right. And that's so kind of...
One of the things that struck me really when I was researching about this project is that when you read about fading or disappearing languages, which is happening like every day, the language is gone, is that...
Speaking of Navajo, that's
Right. And then the way to bring these cultures and these ideas and this way of life back is to reinsert it into some of the elements of the contemporary culture, that it can embrace them again and have a different spin out of it.
Right.
I mean, it doesn't have to change it. They don't have to be in Barcode. But this element, it might allow the younger generation to be able to access to this culture and identify and understand that it's not like something from the past, but it could be something from the present or the future.
Right, and it makes sense. It's more content on their phone. It's kind of like fits in their life, and it's just as easy. And so finally, was it easier or harder than you expected to kind of bringing this into the fine art gallery, like your galleries, the people you've worked with before that know you as a painter, and then you come to them with this? Were they enthusiastic? Were they skeptical? Whatever? And how did that go? And then,
well, I mean, in the realm of galleries, I wouldn't know, because it hasn't been shown very many in galleries. It's more like into museum, which is better. But I mean, it's better in a bigger sense. But first of all, the Pasadena Museum of California Art was the first interested in that, and so we committed.
I'm a huge fan
for like 2 years before we did it. So when I was really in the original draft, they were committed to already. So we were.
It's a good thing it worked out.
It was a little bit of a stressful in the sense that we don't know if this is going to happen or work or what's going to happen. But we have already like a date for exhibition.
Right.
So we worked for like 2 years on producing this stuff. But then after these things start happening, the actual textiles start, happening. We got a lot of media, everybody wrote about it, and it was great. And then now they're coming from another museum in New York, and another, I'm going to do a second
the contemporary tapestries sort of survey.
Right, it's going to be a big, large exhibition in New York, in Museum of Art and Design. And then the Lancaster Museum is going to do a big exhibition as well.
That's so perfect. First of all, I love the Lancaster Museum. I just saw you there. It's a great place. But also because where Lancaster is, that's kind of their trip. It's a museum of art and history.
Right.
And it's kind of in this space age. There's a lot of science that goes on out there.
Aware, but there's a lot of archaeological digs around the area of indigenous from California.
But that's going to be perfect.
So we're going to go through all these pieces of archaeological pieces and get some of the iconography from there. And I'm going to beside the textile, I'm going to do a large installation that it will tell the story of the fade out people, that they're already gone, but we have all the vestiges. So trying to put it together.
I love it. All right, I'll tell you what, when that gets closer, will you come back and talk to us again?
For sure.
Excellent. Thank you so much for coming in today.
So
kicking off our new season with a bang. That's Guillermo Bert, and I'm Shana Dambrot, your host, and we'll see you back here next week for another edition of Creative Current. Thank you.
I've been working in the barcodes for quite a bit now, getting all these different angles to, approaching the culture through this concept of the barcode. But I was exposed to this new development in this technology, which allow you to write and encode a lot more information into these single barcodes. When I was investigating through this new generation, I come out with some of them that they resemble very closely the textile that the Mapuche produce. So I thought it would be interesting to actually encode their lifestyle, the culture, the poetry, and then encode it and then weave it into these textiles.
Yo en mi lucha tengo el don del huaychafe machi. Todos los machis no son así. Un machi no se iría a parar en una plaza a hablar con potencia fuerte, a defender de lo suyo.
Una resistencia de decir nosotros estamos acá, estamos presentes. estamos con nuestra propia lengua.
Así como en esta parte hicieron desaparecer los árboles nativos, intervinieron los ríos.
Y los abuelos, cuántas tierras lo han quitado y ahora puro lleno de forestales, lleno de forestales.
Falta mucho más bien aún por lograr un nivel de reconocimiento más real y efectivo. Muchas veces se margina o se deja de lado la cultura.
Ya ahí se ve realmente el huichafe de la persona que está con ese nehuén, con esa fuerza.
Es una constancia de que existe aún en el siglo XXI un pueblo ancestral.
So how are we doing with the update on the weavers? I'm pulling my hair out now. Do you have any proof that they are actually advancing on this particular weaving?
Estoy ahí de cabeza en esa cosa. Tú estás ya agotado, imagínate yo cómo estoy de agotada. Casi enojada. Igual me gusta dibujar, me encanta hacer diseño en los telares, no es algo que me complica, me gusta hacerlo. Yo creo que también por lo mismo acepté un poco el desafío. Entonces a mí lo que me falta en el telar son 11 hebras. Si tengo 205 y tengo 194, me faltan 11 hebras. 11 hebras negras. Habría que deshacerlo y volverlo a armar nomás y colocarle las hebras que faltan. No me podría dar cuenta que le faltan hebras si no lo hubiese trabajado.
You know, like all the issues that she got and all the decisions you have to make, if I would be like right next to her, like she would be here, we're gonna take care of that in the same day or like in a week. We will take care of all the issues. And then we move on.
I asked her, you know, face to face, I asked her, you know, if she was willing to go to LA.
Right.
And work with you in the studio.
Para que estuvieras ahí solamente trabajando.
¡Guau!
Se había planteado.
¿Y eso para qué? ¿Cuál sería? ¿Qué le facilita eso a él? Ponte tú.